Donald Trump's State Department has announced it's prohibiting 5 European individuals from entering the United States who are accused of coercing American technology companies into suppressing US viewpoints.
Well, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, declined to identify those affected by name, describing them as radical activists, although the Undersecretary of State, Sarah Rogers, has listed some of those who have been sanctioned. They include Thierry Breton, the former EU Commissioner, also Claire Melford, who leads the Global Disinformation Index. That's a UK-based organisation that monitors websites for so-called hate speech and disinformation. Although Sarah Rogers, the Undersecretary of State, had noted that some of the disinformation turned out to be true. That they were monitoring for. So those are just some of the individuals who have now been sanctioned, forbidden from entering the United States.
Well, we're joined now by Republican political commentator Nora Lee Knotson, describing them as radical activists. That is pretty bold. Do you think it was the right call to make?
I think this is basically the Trump administration taking on unelected officials like Thierry Breton, who used to be the head of the European Commission, trying to regulate U.S. tech companies, trying to regulate and censor free speech. As we know, December 5th, they basically slapped Elon Musk and X with a $120 million fine. And this is the administration fighting back and using immigration to stop this unfair regulation of U.S. tech companies and U.S. views being able to be spread within Europe as well and not be censored.
It's really interesting because Sarah Rogers, the Undersecretary of State, was over here in London a month or so ago, spoke to us here on GB News and said that the administration would be taking some action. We now today know what that action is. But interestingly, she said this on Twitter: none of those sanctioned is a current UK or EU official. However, we know that foreign governments' officials are actively targeting the United States. Today's list is illustrative and not exhaustive. We stand ready and willing to expand it. I suppose the question to you, Nora Lee, is this a threat, a sort of first taster of what could come to sitting politicians?
I think this is basically starting the negotiations for dealing with the Digital Safety Act and having a fairer basis for implementing it, not being able to just censor people when you don't like their views. If we remember in 2024, Breton also came out and said he wasn't going to allow Elon Musk to have the live interview with Trump. He said he might be spreading harmful, hateful speech. Again, people spoke out against it. That was trying to interfere in elections. You don't have to agree with politicians, but you can hear them express their views. So there's a big pushback here about our freedom of speech. We've seen it here in the UK. It's been a big problem where you have critical views of some of the woke ideology, and that's considered hate crime. I think it's a very important discussion to be had. And we've already seen pushback from Costa saying this is not the way allies behave. But the Trump administration would turn it the other way around. Allies don't behave by censoring American views or American companies.
I mean, is there a chance? The Online Safety Act has already gone through Parliament, but we have seen plenty of U-turns from Keir Starmer's government recently. With this pressure from Donald Trump, with this very thinly veiled threat, do you think there's any chance that we could see part of the Online Safety Act taken back?
I think everything is possible. As you know, there have been lots of U-turns. And Trump has also commented very vocally that the European Union is using this Online Safety Act to fund itself because it can find 6% of the total turnover in Europe to the companies. So there's a big negotiation going on here. And yes, there's a big threat that's been placed, sadly, ahead of the festive season. But I do expect a lot of changes to potentially occur going forward.
Well, it's going to be an absolutely fascinating back and forth to watch. Europe keeps regulating, sanctioning, trying to ban, trying to fine, and now there are visa sanctions for those who have historically been involved in it. Whether or not this advances to those currently involved in it, I suppose that's the big thing to wait and see. But Nora Lee Knotson, thanks indeed for joining us and talking through this extraordinary move from the State Department.
Hello, I'm Bev Turner. Now, it can feel like the money in our bank accounts at the moment does not keep up with the cost of living, and maybe there's a solution. I'm here today with the CEO of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. Cameron, what is TallyMoney?
Well, Bev, with TallyMoney, you get a current account and a debit card, but instead of pounds, you use milligrams of gold as your everyday money.
So why gold?
Gold traditionally is a great store of value. It has, on average, gone up at over 11% per annum for the last 25 years against the pound. It's tripled in value in the last decade. And in the last 2 years alone, it's increased by 50% against the pound. Banks' savings products just can't compete with that level of growth.
But this isn't just about gold. This is about a currency that you guys have created at TallyMoney. Explain it to me as though I'm an idiot.
So, look, people need to be able to hold their earnings and build their savings in a money that retains its value and remains in their legal control and remains theirs to access, away from government control.
Great. You had me at not exposed to government control.
You should feel safe and happy with your money. You should have peace of mind the more money you see in your bank balance, and that's the type of thing we're trying to deliver and give people choice in the type of money they get to use every day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you.
Two Britons are among 5 people who have been denied American visas in a new ruling by the US government. Social media campaigners Imran Ahmed and Claire Melford were labelled radical activists by the Trump administration, who accused them of seeking to coerce American tech platforms into suppressing free speech. Imran Ahmed has links to senior Labour figures, and a government spokesperson said that the UK is fully committed to upholding the right to free speech. We're joined now by former Conservative advisor James Price for more on this. James, Merry Christmas. Thank you for joining us. And tell us a bit more about the decision that's been made here and why it could have some more headaches in the store for Keir Starmer.
Yeah, happy Christmas to you too, mate. Thank you for having me on today. I think this is we're seeing the manifestation of the earlier release of the national security strategy that the Americans put out. And in the section on Europe, which caused an awful lot of hubbub and talked about the threat of civilizational erasure in Europe and all the rest of these sorts of quite big loaded terms, one of the major threats that the United States identified in Europe and to some extent in Britain as well has been the censorship on free speech. I think there's something to the a bit of embarrassment from the American administration that it was the United States themselves under the Biden administration, under many of those big tech companies, all of which of course are American, but they were the ones that pushed a lot of this sort of censorship in the first place. And this is the United States trying to make amends to destroy this sort of, they call a censorship industrial complex that they in some ways did build up themselves. And so I think this is the manifestation of trying to put a stop to this and this threat to what it sees as European civilization itself if you cannot criticize properly your politicians. We're very lucky in Britain that we've got GB News, we've got other newspapers and places like this where we can still hear what's actually going on. That's a little bit trickier actually on the continent in Europe now. You've got German politicians immune from being criticized or being insulted in all sorts of ways. And even in Poland, you've got the biggest privately held media company looking like another foreign court in Liechtenstein could take its ownership away. And at the moment, that's one of the few conservative voices in Poland, and that might change. So there's definitely something to the American fear, I think. And I think everybody watching this channel would understand how important it is that we have free speech and are able to criticize our leaders, especially our leaders, but everybody else as well.
Well, James, you say this is a crisis on the continent. I think a lot of our audience will say this is a major problem in Britain as well. And the two people who are British who've been caught up in this visa ban, we've got someone who's a chief executive of the Centre for Countering Digital Hate and a co-founder of the Global Disinformation Index. Now, the US government accuses those people essentially of doing rather the opposite of their claims, and actually of promoting censorship and shutting down the free exchange of ideas.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's no surprise that I think it's Keir Starmer's chief of staff who co-founded the first one of these organisations. I mean, I don't know about you, both of them to me sound like they come straight from the pages of 1984. Anything that sounds sort of that totalitarian to me is always concerning. And yeah, I think we've seen this in the United Kingdom. There are some people who have been put in prison for writing, unpleasant things. I wouldn't want to defend the content of lots of these things, but more people get arrested in Britain than any other country in the world, it seems, at the moment. And the Online Safety Act that was designed only to save children from seeing awful things really on the internet is now used to censor all kinds of things. I think even your colleague Patrick Christie's monologues are sometimes blocked from people being able to view them on Twitter unless they prove their age. I know that Patrick is a man of firm conviction, but I don't think that it's something that the state should be involved in blocking us from hearing what a journalist has to say on one of the most watched news channels, if not the most watched news channels now. And I think the problem you've got here, and having been inside government, is politicians do get a bit of stick, and some of that is not warranted. Some of it obviously is and is good and important for democracy. But I think that politicians feel this stuff perhaps a bit more keenly than everybody else because they feel that they're on the wrong end of it. And they've got, of course, got the power to block some of this stuff. But we know where this leads. And I think the real concern for me is that when someone highlights something particularly unpleasant that's happening out there in the world, and Elon Musk would perhaps be a great example of this because he's been very vociferous talking about, say, the grooming gangs that you personally, Charlie, have done so much to uncover. And people say, oh, I can't believe that Elon Musk is using this unpleasant language. We must stop him from broadcasting this. And they get to have an attack of the messenger rather than the message and the content and the awful crimes themselves. And that's always the temptation when you're in power, that you can try and block these sorts of mean, nasty things, and you get to just mark your own homework rather than having the public do it for you.
Yeah, I think the government has resisted those claims that Elon Musk played a big role in forcing the grooming gang scandal back into our national conversation, but I think everyone else sees that it did play a significant role, and his intervention was pretty serious on that front. But James, some people have accused the Trump administration of sort of lacking its ability to promote its values overseas. Others have also criticised it for doing too much of that, right? For interfering in European and British affairs. Emmanuel Macron and the EU have both now accused Washington this afternoon of coercion and intimidation with these visa bans. How do you see it?
Well, I think, first of all, any country has the right to choose who it wants to go into its country. And of the two Brits involved, one, I think, permanently lives in the United States and has had their green card taken away. The other one's had their visa taken away, and others are being blocked. I think we should all get a lot more comfortable again with countries choosing who they want to enter their country. And there are plenty of people who've entered our country in recent years that I wouldn't want to have in, whether they say awful things or do awful things. So I think that that's perfectly within the rights of a sovereign entity. When it comes to someone like Emmanuel Macron talking about this, his main commissioner for the European Union for a long time, Thierry Breton, was another one of these individuals who has been sanctioned. Now, he's someone that wrote a letter to Elon Musk saying, you must not interview Donald Trump, who's then candidate Trump again, on the platform that you own, because this law that we've written inside the EU says you mustn't do it. And this is absolutely farcical to do this. And I think for too long, too many people have had too many opinions about the internal politics of the United States and trying to meddle in it there. We saw the Labour Party send candidates over to go and campaign for Kamala Harris, or for all the good that it did her, frankly, or that it did any of those Labour people at all, and less time spent worrying on their own problems. And just yesterday, we put this in context, we saw that the American economic growth was up at 4.3% at an annualized rate. It's about 2% in the Eurozone, and it's about 0.4% in Britain. And we've seen, I think just today, Axios reported that crime has seen the biggest single year drop in American history because of what's going on. It's not happening in Europe, but yeah, it's much easier for these politicians to make a big song and dance criticizing the bad orange man in the White House than dealing with their own issues. And at Christmas, I'll quote the good book that it's easier for us to notice the mote in our neighbour's eye and not the log in our own eye.
OK, former Conservative advisor James Price signing off with a lovely biblical moment there, as we'd expect. Merry Christmas to you, James. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.